If you're thinking about moving and you want to learn about what everyday life is going to be like in your new town, this is the place for you. On Open House, we sit down with local, top producing real estate agents to help you find the best places to live in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So if you don't want buyer's remorse and you want to find your dream town, we are here for you. So go ahead and book a free call with us and we'll help guide you to the area that is right for you. Now, let's jump in and learn about your new home.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in DC. My name is Zach, and today we have Cliff Weeks with us, and we're going to be talking about Gainesville, Virginia. So Cliff, how about you introduce yourself? How long have you been a realtor, and what do you love about living in the Gainesville area?
Thanks. Yeah, I've been a realtor for about 8 years. I'm an associate broker in Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and I have lived in Gainesville for about 8 years as well. My family and I absolutely love living out here. When we moved from DC out to this area, the whole point was it's close enough to commute into the city if you don't mind being in the car for a little bit. But now they've got shuttle buses, so you have different options. You're close enough to the city to experience all the city stuff you want, but also far enough to the country to kind of appreciate some of the unique aspects of living out here, like the wine country and the horse country. It's just kind of a perfect mix for our family.
That's really cool. So would you say that it's a little bit more rural where you're at?
So I think we're kind of on the border of rural. There's been a lot of building over the last 5 to 10 years in the Gainesville area. A lot of communities have popped up. So it kind of has that suburban subdivision feel, specifically kind of where I live. But you are minutes away from getting into, farms, pastures, things like that. So it's just, you're right on the border of a good rural spot.
That's cool. And I know that you'd mentioned it's not too far from DC either. How long does it take to get from Gainesville to DC?
Well, I think like anything in this area, it largely depends on who's on the road and kind of we're dealing with. But, you're about 35 miles west of DC down 66. So on a good day, you're less than an hour. Obviously if you're in the rush hour traffic, it's going to be a little bit more because it's DC. But no, I think it's a good mix, not too far, and just far enough away.
Yeah, a lot of people are liking that middle ground nowadays because especially if you grew up in the city, it seems like everyone that grew up in the city wants to live somewhere suburban or rural, and then it's like the opposite for people who grew up there. So good middle ground for people. What is just talking about like economics and commutes and stuff, where do people typically work in Gainesville? Or if they don't work in Gainesville, what do they do and where do they work?
So I think it's one of the kind of unique spots here is we're so kind of in the middle of a lot of things. I have neighbors who work downtown. I have neighbors who work down at Quantico. There's people who work in the vineyards. We're kind of smack dab. They've built up a ton of these new data centers are coming out our way. So that's another big draw for people to the area, for people who work there. It's just such a good location. Belvoir is another spot I've had neighbors work from. So you're just commutable to all those places without it being too excessive travel-wise.
That is really nice. You mentioned downtown, is there like a downtown area of Gainesville?
So I would consider we have kind of like an old downtown Haymarket, which has kind of got a little more historic feel, which is right next to Gainesville. But Gainesville has a downtown. It's kind of the Virginia Crossings area. And consider that our downtown, which has movie theater, Target, restaurants, anything you could really hope for.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's good. Where would you say is like the biggest or the nearest urban downtown area when it comes to some of the taller buildings and some of the higher end shopping and things like that?
So we're still, if you're heading towards the Beltway, you're going to get into Tyson's is probably the closest. area for the more high rise, kind of bigger buildings area for us.
Gotcha. How far away is that?
Probably 20-25 miles.
Okay. So yeah, it is very like on the edge of suburban and rural.
Exactly. It's not, like I said, for our family, it's just close enough for the easy access, but far enough away where you don't feel like you live in the city.
Yeah, that's really cool. What do you guys do on weekends? What are there things to do in or just around Gainesville?
So if you feel like hanging around Gainesville, like I said, there's the Virginia Crossings where you have the movie theater. You have any kind of shopping you might need to do around here. But we like to go, there's a bunch of wineries. They're really close to Gainesville. So one of our favorite things is to go to like Bull Run Winery or Barrel Oak or Chrysalis or any of the ones that are right around us. Let our kids kind of run around. There's always other kids to play with. On the weekends, during the summer, I like to sponsor Twilight Polo out at Great Meadows, which is kind of a fun little family gathering to watch some polo. Because like I said, you're kind of smack dab in horse country as well as wine country.
Yeah,
So it's just extra stuff to kind of get into.
that's really cool. Well, and you had mentioned there's always other kids to play with. What would you say is like the demographic that lives in Gainesville primarily?
Like for the most part in the area I live in, it seems mostly kind of a younger family area. Not necessarily having a family, but that seems to be the majority of like my neighborhood. So it's just kind of a nice feeling where having young kids myself, I was just send them. There's always kids to play with right outside.
That's really cool. What do you think the draw is about Gainesville that might bring some of these younger families to want to live there as opposed to, DC or further out where it's more rural?
I think the big thing is, we've got for all the growth that's happened, you've got everything you could need for a younger family, kind of a newer hospital. The schools are ranked pretty well. And like I said, you don't get the feeling of being in DC, but you get the benefits of living close to DC in terms of kids' entertainment, things like that, going down to watch any of the little kids' concerts or shows that get put on. We're not too far from George Mason. They do concerts and things like that there too. So another big concert draw, we're literally right next to Jiffy Lube amphitheater. So you get to happen out here.
Yeah, so it seems like there's quite a bit to do. If you're willing to make a little bit of a drive too, there's quite a bit. And you had mentioned schools. Do you guys have only private schools in the area, or do you have some like?
No, the public schools are all rated pretty well here. We're in Prince William County, which has a really good school system.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about the schools in your county. So it's a trend I'm seeing, and they're all not too far away from each other, which seems pretty nice. So things to do. I mean, you mentioned that area where there's shopping, there's the movie theater. What about nature? Are there any like dedicated parks in Gainesville or any like conservation areas or anything like that?
Yeah, so I guess it's one of the things where we feel like we're smack dab in the middle of things. For the history or getting outside and walking around, the Manassas battlefield is right up the road for hiking, kind of experience the history there. Just huge spaces to go walk around. And then, you're really not that far from Shenandoah either. So if you want to go up into the mountains, it's really not that bad of a drive. So the Skyline Drive up that way. So like I said, it's one of those feelings that you're smack dab in the middle of pretty much everything you could want to do here.
It seems like Gainesville is the place to move if you're wanting that like peace and that more like smaller community aspect of things, but you still want accessibility with all the other things that you'd want to do. You just don't want it to be like right in your backyard.
Yep.
So that's really cool. Does Gainesville do any, just speaking of community, like do you guys do any events specific to Gainesville surrounding holidays or anything else like that?
So the downtown Haymarket area, which is that they're right next to each other, that little historic downtown shop usually has some kind of small town, I can't even think of the word right now, like little celebrations, farmers markets on the weekends that are kind of unique to that. I wouldn't say there's a lot of big festivals or any big crazy events like that, but the community, you can definitely tell, kind of gets into whatever different holidays are going on.
Mm.
A lot of good decorations up. You can go see what other people have done around the neighborhoods.
That's really cool. Do they do the farmers markets like, every week or every other week, or does it just kind of happen whenever?
I think it varies by season. So during the summer, they have them a little more often. I think I'm pretty aware of once a month. But
Gotcha.
yeah, it's right in the strip, and this is local produce, local goods.
Yeah, with you guys being just a little bit further out from DC, I would anticipate you have some pretty good farmers markets out there, which is really nice. If someone's wanting to move to Gainesville, like what are they looking to spend on a house out there?
So obviously, with most areas in the DMV, we've seen our prices increase a decent amount over the last 2 years. But there's just a wide variety of options here. Whether you wanted to live in a gated golf community, or just kind of another little subdivision, or maybe kind of live kind of on the fringes of the outside of Gainesville and get a little more space, you're looking anywhere from above the $500,000 to over $2 million, depending on what you want to spend and what kind of community you are hoping to live in.
Gotcha. So yeah, I was seeing there's quite a few like gated golf communities and things like that, which I would assume those are on the higher end of that range. But if you're looking for, let's say, like a 3-bed, 2-bath, or a 4-bed, and just a regular subdivision, is that where you'd hang around like that 500,000-600,000 range?
In the more subdivision-y kind of communities, you're looking more along the probably the 600 to 900 range. That you can easily go above the $1 million point when you get into some of the gated communities like Dominion Valley or Piedmont.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, you're paying for the piece, which is that makes sense, and also the accessibility. So that's pretty cool. If someone was, thinking about moving to Gainesville, or just in that area in general, but they needed a little bit of a push to get them to decide, what would you say?
I would say that if you want a place that kind of feels a little more homey, a little more suburban, have that neighbor community feel, with your own little space, I think is the big push. That if you want a yard, you might not get living downtown DC, this is a place where you could go, or you have a ton of options for things you might want to do on the weekends with your family, or even if you're not married, you just want some peace and quiet, getting out of the city. There's so many options: breweries, wineries, hiking. It's kind of the sky's the limit.
That's awesome. I'm pretty convinced Gainesville sounds like a really cool place to be. So for all of our viewers, if you guys are wanting to move to the DC area, or Gainesville in particular, book a call with us below. Our contacts in the description. We'd love to help you make a safe transition. And then Cliff, thanks for coming on. Really, really appreciate all the info, and we should do this again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot.